Hello, and welcome to Mapping the College Audition, a podcast where we explore the landscape of the college theater world and try to demystify this daunting audition process. I'm your host, Charlie Murphy, director of MTCA, that's Musical Theater College Auditions, and today we've got Rachel Barnett from Millikin University on the show. Very excited to have Rachel on. We've been wanting to have Milikin on for a while, and I think it's a really great episode. I even start a little movement at the end of the episode. If you want to hear me rant and rave about access in the college audition process, then listen on, or skip ahead if you want to get right to it. It's around the end of this episode. I don't know the timestamp yet because we're not there, so don't know what to say there. To my seniors listening to this live, oh my, here we are. It's Unified audition season. We're about to have New York City Unifieds this weekend, and then Chicago and LA before you know it. It is also a COVID surge, so please be careful out there, everyone. I think listeners of the podcast may know this. I'm generally a faction of live your life in this post-COVID world. I'm not a sort of very COVID cautious or very COVID obsessed person. And I just kind of believe we can't overhaul our lives completely forever. That's my feelings. Of course, I respect however anyone feels on the issue. But I'm also a fan of being practical. And if you're traveling and going to strange places, let's just remember our general sickness avoidance hygiene as well as what we've learned from COVID, yeah? Of course, this means washing hands. We've known this for a long time. Don't touch your face. That's hard for me sometimes, but it means you don't touch your eyes, don't touch your mouth, your singular mouth when at all possible. And yes, if you can stand it, please put that mask back on for the short stints when there's a surge and it's the busiest part of your college audition season. You got to make your own determinations in life, your own risk reward, how you want to think about that. But for instance, maybe this week isn't the best week to go to a huge indoor party with all of your friends, right? Both for the sake of your voice, we don't want you shouting or drinking things that you shouldn't be drinking, and sickness. Again, it's your decision. You're never going to be able to completely avoid sickness. But I would say for these next couple weeks, can we try to do what we can? You know, I love to make athlete analogies on this podcast, but athletes, when they have a huge game, they have to make decisions about their bodies and what they're going to put themselves through. And I invite you all to think about that and your voice specifically as part of that, as you hear my voice ravaged by the daycares of New York City's almost constantly. And please, we're talking about some of the physical health, but please don't forget about your mindset walking into these auditions. For the parents and students, I know I've been hammering a lot about this in recent podcasts, but it is so important. Yes, you have to have a physical and vocal warm-up that makes your body as limber as it can be in all the ways that we need it to be limber. But you also have to put yourself in the right frame of mind to go out and nail your auditions. Don't let yourself be at the whim of how you're randomly feeling that day or how the person before you is going to choose to interact with you. Make a plan for yourself about how you like to psych yourself up. It can be really simple. It doesn't need to be a huge routine. It could be a short mantra you have written on a cue card or on the front of your binder. It could be a favorite song that you like to listen to. It could be a lucky charm if you're more superstitious. I mean, almost all athletes have some sort of ritualized routine that tells their bodies and minds it's game time, depending on the sport that you're in, right? Some of these preparations are hours long from a physical perspective in terms of warming up, but there's almost always some element that cues them into right now. It's happening right now, right? LeBron, throws the chalk into the air right before tip. Steph Curry runs down the court in these very specific patterns of steps, exactly where he's going, right to the basket, hits the basket, and then comes out. They're very specific things. You'll see batters, I've talked about that with their batting stance. They undo, I'm doing this all physically, you can see this, but they take their gloves off, they put them back on, they tap their bat a certain number of times, they may cross themselves, whatever it is for them to get themselves psychologically prepped. It almost doesn't matter what you do as long as you've got something that helps you lock in. And this is true at all of your auditions, but especially at Unifieds, where there can be more than a little chaos. I'll add in for Unifieds, we've been talking about prep before the audition a lot, but I think what can help you stay psychologically prepped is what is your process of synthesizing and cooling down from audition 2. How do you get yourself back to neutral so you aren't on all day or all weekend or all week, knowing you're going to need to ramp yourself back up? You don't want to just be in that on state the entire time and get exhausted. Again, some people will use music for that cool down. Some people journal, right? It might involve talking to your mom and dad about the audition, or maybe that's the last thing you want to do at that moment. But think about it. right? For those who did a mock audition with us this year, I go over it a bit in the debrief meeting of like, what are the questions that I like to give myself? I give a short checklist of questions that you can give yourself. I invite you to make that process your own, of how you can synthesize the audition, hopefully learn something from the experience, and quickly move on as well. You might need to recall something about that audition. If you end up getting into the school, that might be relevant, or if you want to come back and write a thank you note about who was in the room, what happened, that kind of thing. So it's great to get some of that information down. And it's also great if something did get a bit off that you can maybe self-correct as much as possible. But you don't want to be obsessing about the previous audition for the next 3 hours leading up to your next one, right? I keep using that athlete analogy. You watch the game tape, you make your mental notes, and then it's on to the next play. If you focus on the process being a learning experience, it makes it much easier to enjoy the things that go wrong as opportunities to learn. And it also secretly puts you in the right mindset for being viewed by these colleges as learning is what you're going to do for the next years. So instead of showing up in performance show-off mode, if you can show up as a learner, as somebody who's going, I know I'm going to make mistakes, but I'm here genuinely having this experience, it's going to make you much more attractive to the colleges themselves as well. For those seniors, I know I'm senior focused. Sorry, juniors, we're going to get to you in a second. It's just seniors. It's all happening for them right now. I mentioned in the last episode, but I'm going to say it again. For those who aren't MTCA students, or maybe if you are an MTCA student, but you're a podcast listener and have not been attending our webinars, I would love for you to check out the next few webinars. We're going to get deep into some of the new parts of the process that are coming your way as you hear back from schools, as you negotiate scholarships, you deal with wait lists, final decisions, etc. There's some really meaty webinars coming your way, so please check those out. Okay, that's enough for now. Let's get on to this interview with Rachel Barnett from Millikin. Well, we are so excited to have Rachel Barnett on the show from Millikin University. Rachel has a BS from Illinois State in theater/design production, an MFA from the University of Wisconsin in costume design, previously was an associate professor of costume design at Oklahoma City University and a lecturer at Baylor before becoming the director of the School of Theater and Dance at Millikin University, which is located in Decatur, Illinois. They take about 15 to 20 in their musical theater class, 6 to 10 in their acting class. They have degrees in acting BFA, musical theater BFA, as well as some other cool BFAs in theater production design, stage management, etc. Rachel, welcome on the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm good. I'm so glad to have you. I read that little brief bio sort of your education. I'd love to start off with introduce yourself to us a little bit of what are some fun facts or tidbits or things we should know about your journey to Millikin before we dive deep into the school. What do we need to know about you?
Fun facts about me. Well, like you said, I'm originally a costume designer. I've spent over 20 years working in costumes specifically. I really fell in love with it in undergrad. I had no idea that people could be designers
Hmm.
or work behind stage. I only had a tiny bit of acting experience in high school, and that was not exactly for me.
When you went to Illinois State, were you thinking I might be a performer originally before you
Actually,
moved
I
backstage?
didn't. My original degree plan was poli-sci.
Oh,
I
okay.
was pre-law destined, might have been an attorney.
Hmm.
I really enjoyed mock trial, which I found out later was improv with research
Improv with
involved.
research.
And so I had that little bit of performance in me, but found my love backstage.
I love
I
it.
had some really fantastic teachers. I got in a class that was Introduction to Costumes and got immersed in the history and the research, drawing and painting, and just absolutely fell in love. So I found my home there,
Hmm.
and I moved into design and production fully. And then I found out that after sort of 2 years of working as an undergrad in the costume shop and
Hmm.
working on some shows that I needed a little bit more education, and so then I went to get my MFA, after that, and I fell in love with teaching there,
Uh-huh.
actually. I went to get my MFA to get that experience that I felt like I didn't have under my belt at that point in my early 20s, and I loved mentoring the undergraduate students
Hmm.
while I was a grad student. So I was a TA. I taught history courses. I taught in the costume lab. I taught all the kids how to sew on buttons,
Hmm.
how to do hems, how to maintain an organized shop. And then I went into teaching. after that.
So
So yeah,
and journeyed around a little bit. Look, we hit Baylor, we
I
hit Oklahoma City,
did. I
and
did.
then here we are at Millikin, which
And here we are at Millikin. So I'm a Central Illinois native. My family is in the area. And so I had been away out of state for many, many years
mhm,
and found it necessary to kind of come back home. I
yep.
found an opportunity that worked closer to family. Also, a sort of a step up in a director position, a leadership position after being a faculty member for several years. And then it just seemed like the right thing at the right time.
I love it. So, and we're going to kind of zero in on what we think of Millikin and how Millikin is different than
Yeah.
other programs. So, certainly you can speak toward the programs you've been at before, but let's maybe just
Mhm.
start toward, what do you think makes Millikin unique? What makes a Millikin student, which is maybe different than a theater student at a different university?
Sure. Millikin is special because it is a small private university that has this small sort of community. So it's a place of about 1,800
Hmm.
students. And in our theater program, the School of Theater and Dance, we have about 160 of those
Hmm.
students. The College of Fine Arts is actually a large portion of our campus. So we make up more than a quarter of campus between art and creative media, music, and theater and dance. So fine arts and performing arts is such a big piece of what Millikin does. And over several years, this idea of performance learning came up at Millikin. It was started in the theater and dance program. Of course, we do performance learning all the time. We are performative, we are creative. And they started adopting that philosophy of performance learning, enacting your learning or being involved in your community
Hmm.
across campus. So I found that really unique when I came to Millikan. It was something that I had not heard other places, that
Hmm.
campus wide and arts and sciences and other programs, they were talking about performance.
Hmm.
this is fascinating. So the Millikan student is a really dedicated student that usually knows what they want to do. Right. We have 4 BFA programs, which means those are concentrated programs.
Yep.
These students are entering with a path in mind, but we also offer a BA program for students that are definitely interested in theater. They're creative, but they're multifaceted. Maybe they want to be an educator, or maybe they want to be a director or a writer or other things, and have flexibility. Then they also have that flexibility in a more generalized degree.
Now, did you just create a word? Did you say multifaceted?
I did.
That was
I'm
awesome. I've never heard that, but I'm totally taking that. Like multifaceted is a word.
multifaceted, yes.
Multifascinated?
Fascin
I love
Yes.
that. You're a good BA candidate. You're
I did.
multifascinated. I love that. Okay, we're inventing words on
There
the
you
podcast.
go.
Um,
And I love it.
I'd love to talk a little more granularly, especially about the acting musical theater students.
Yeah.
If you're talking about the 4-year curriculum, because
Mhm.
again, we talk about different BFAs and how kind of concentrated they are, both in terms of other academic pursuits, which we'll get into other things that they can
Sure.
do at the university, but also just kind of what is that BFA curriculum going to look like over the 4 years, kind of freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year. Maybe start with musical theater. What is my day going to look like, and what is my journey gonna be?
Yeah, absolutely. So our musical theater degree, like I said, is rather concentrated. They have quite a few credits that are musical theater focused, and they have a small amount of credits that are in university studies, more generalized studies. And they have a theater core, they have an acting and voice core. They have a musical support core, and they also have a dance and movement core. So, all of those students are taking courses in these areas that are going to build up this foundation for
Hmm.
them. So in that theater core are classes that everyone is going to take as a theater major, regardless of their degree plan, things like play
Hmm.
analysis, acting one, directing one, theater history, some of their technical theater requirements. They have to choose from a selection of whether it's costume or lighting, scenic classes there. Then they have an acting and voice selection. So they move on from acting one into acting two, and those acting and musical theater students are together in those classes, in those early freshman and sophomore classes, and where they're also taking voice for the stage, advanced voice, and then they can progress on into those upper level acting classes as well. So we have advanced scene study classes where they're working with partners. And then we also have acting for musical theater classes. So those are
Hmm.
specified to those musical theater students. We also have really unique classes for those musical theater students in the upper level electives, like belting technique and performance is something that
Hmm.
I didn't experience before coming to Millikin. So they're working on that contemporary belting technique and how to do it in a healthy way.
Hmm.
They also are taking musical theater professional preparation as a senior. So they have built over time. They take repertory classes, they take musical theater history classes where they're building their knowledge base, and then in that final preparation class, they're building that book that they're going
Hmm.
to go out and audition with and be prepared in the professional world. So that's pretty unique to them. They also take movement classes with the actors, right? Your beginning movement, but then they're going to take a variety of dance classes as well. So there's that core.
Well, I was just going to say, while we're kind of differentiating between acting musical theater classes, I'd love to kind of both hear, as an acting major, what are my options if I'm kind of musical theater curious? Maybe I'm mostly focused on acting, but I do sing and I want to take some of the music classes, take some dance classes. What are my options there? And also maybe as an acting major, are there classes that I get uniquely? Am I filling my
Yes.
time differently, than the dance and then the singing if I'm more focused
Yes,
as acting?
absolutely. There's a variety of things. So there are some of those musical theater classes that I mentioned. Those are specific to the musical theater major, so they're
Hmm.
restricted classes, like the repertoire class, like the professional prep class. But the acting majors have their own version of that. So
Hmm.
there is an acting professional preparation course as well.
Hmm.
They also have more electives and upper level acting classes. So there's on camera acting, which musical theater or acting could take.
Hmm.
We've had specialized clowning classes. We've had black and brown voices where they're working on specifically BIPOC playwrights
Hmm.
and people in that area. And so as far as music classes, there are applied voice classes and music theory classes as well. So if you're an acting person and you want to dip your toe, you
Hmm.
certainly could take those voice lessons. You could do some singing, but then the trickier the music theory classes are restricted to
Uh-huh.
those music students.
Totally makes sense. Yeah, and do you feel like a discipline of the three for musical theater that you
Mhm.
guys say you focus on? Or some schools say we're really most acting based, we're really strong in music, we're stronger in dance. Is there one of the three that feels like it pops for you?
Well, I would say that it's pretty well balanced overall. I know a lot of people talk about triple threat, but when we're talking about our credits and how we can make things balanced, it's really hard to remove one of those elements. So we're pretty strong in all three areas. The dance program here is rather fantastic, and the people that we have teaching those courses have a lot of amazing background. But I would say that the musical theater specific classes that are not just in the School of Music or just acting courses, but these hybrid classes that are so focused on musical theater, I think that what makes us unique and different than other schools.
I love it. Well, and then we touched on it a little bit, but you mentioned some credits that are outside of the School of Theater. What does that mean in terms of your students? I mean, how many of your students can potentially get a minor? Do any of your students try to get double majors with their BFAs? How does that work if I'm interested in poli sci or if I'm multifaceted?
Absolutely. Multifaceted.
Mm.
So a lot of our students do get minors. Many of our MT students get dance minors. So we
Uh,
don't have a dance major, but you could take a variety of upper level dance classes if that is part of your strong core. Your
mhm.
triple threat is really heavy in dance. You can proceed in that direction. We also offer a dance certificate to other students on campus to come into SOTAD and take those dance classes as well. Um,
The School of
a
Theater
lot
and
of
Dance, SOTAD.
Yes,
Look that up.
so
Okay, good.
tad. They're
Mhm.
really into acronyms around here. So I
Mhm.
started in July. I left that piece out of my journey, but I'm rather new to Millikin, so I've had to adopt all the lingo since I've
Picking it
been
up
here.
fast. We love it.
Yeah, trying. But yeah, many minors. Foreign language is another minor. Um, there's a lot of business or art related or arts administration minors as well. So those that want to dip their toe into that area of business and sort
Yeah.
of propelling themselves in their career, they can do that. A double major is harder with a BFA. I will say that. It's really acceptable to get in and out in your 4-year core with that minor, but to do a double major often takes more time. So
Yep.
an extra semester or more if you want to be able to finish all those credits.
Totally makes sense.
Double minors in the BA are way more common, and because that credit hour is flexible, that's where most of our students that are double majoring
Yep.
are in the BA.
Yep.
Mhm.
Well, and you touched on this a little bit in terms of some senior year classes helping prep the book. I'd love to just kind of talk about senior year and beyond in terms of the launch into the business. So, what are you doing in terms of, of course, preparing the students for with the knowledge they need, but then also when we talk about connections with agents, managers, how they're going to sort of hit the ground running in their various cities, how do you sort of do that preparation?
Yeah. So we offer a class, both a class and a travel piece in a showcase class. So that's something that you probably hear from other universities. They have some kind of showcase. And what does the showcase mean? So we have a showcase class that gives them the business prep. They work on their resumes, they work on their websites and sort of branding and promoting themselves. And then they are preparing their audition pieces to go to either Chicago or New York.
Uh-huh.
And our faculty go with them on those trips and put them in front of casting agents and some other folks that can help them get connected. We also have an amazing alumni network in many, many cities,
Hmm.
Chicago, New York being two of several. And we have a strong base there. So we're setting them up with former Millikin folks who are more than happy to open their doors and their resources and sort of their information to our students in the
Yep.
world.
Totally makes sense. And I often ask this, leads me perfectly to sort of the breakdown. Where do you find most of your students end up? So where do you find, do more of them end up in New York? Do more end up in Chicago? Do many end up in LA? It sounds like the showcases are just in Chicago and New York, but where does it
Correct.
feel like the breakdown happens in terms of, a couple years out of school? Where are most people?
Well, they're kind of scattered all over the place is the answer, that they're across the country. There's definitely a stronger base or a greater majority in probably Chicago or New York. Many of our students, when we're seeing sort of the casting calls coming out of Chicago in regional theaters, they're just full of Millikin alums.
Hmm.
Also, lots of our Millikin alums are on national tours. Several of them have been on Broadway or working in New York actively. So they're kind of all over the place. And I know we mentioned design production a little bit, and that's something that kind of side gig, but our designers are going all over as well. They're
Totally.
working in theme parks. They're going. We had a few graduates just go on tour with Sting last year.
Hmm.
So they're going all over.
Yep. And it's we don't talk about this maybe enough on the pod, but sort of
Yeah.
the cool advantages for an actor or a musical theater major when you're at a school where there is a well-renowned, whether it's stage management, whether it's design,
Yeah.
whether it's production,
Oh,
it just elevates
100%.
the level of the school for the whole cohort.
It really does, because then you can let everyone know all of the amazing opportunities that you maybe didn't know were available. Just like in my early career, I didn't know that there was anything outside of acting. We pulled costumes out of a closet. I had no idea what the people did behind the scenes, and once I started to develop that, and that's what we're offering to our undergraduate students, here's a peek into what goes on backstage, all of the roles and the jobs that are available, and here are some skills in that area. So, should you become interested, we're going to open that pathway. You want to be involved as a wardrobe supervisor and see what that touring life is like? Great. Here's the opportunity to do that.
Yep.
So I think that opens a lot of people's eyes. We've had several performers in the past that go on to work in design production.
Hmm.
There actually was one alum recently, I think, that went into film, and he did some hair and makeup on Killers of the Flower Moon. So
Cool. Yeah.
many, many opportunities if you just open those doors to possibility.
Totally. Well, and I asked half the breakdown question. So, in terms of where the people end up, where do you feel like, in terms of your incoming classes, how many come from the
Mhm.
Illinois area, the Midwest? How many come from the East Coast, West Coast, across the world, et cetera?
Yeah. Really, our students come from all over. A large majority are probably going to be Illinois residents. There are a lot of Chicagoland sort of folks that
Hmm.
come, but at the same time, we are getting national attention. We are going to conferences and festivals
Hmm.
nationwide. And so we've got students from Indiana and Missouri and Kentucky, Tennessee, Texas. Texas is a wonderful place for high school theater. I'm sure you probably know that from who you've talked to in the past, but teaching in Texas and also in Oklahoma and being
Hmm.
in that area, Texas has an excellent high school theater system.
Hmm.
So we do see some folks from that area.
I love it. All right, let's get to the dirty business. Let's talk about cost, because I
Yeah.
see a big whopping number for that tuition. And you mentioned a
Ooh.
private university. What we've come up with is 56,000, is approximately is where we're looking at. What does that look like in terms of scholarships? Like, how many of your students are paying that full sticker price? What, I know you're not going to be able to give me exact numbers, but how many are paying closer to half? How many are getting full rides? How does it work in terms of sort of merit scholarship, academic
Yeah.
scholarship, et cetera?
Well, before I go deep dive into academic scholarship, probably some good news that didn't maybe come up in your research is that Millikin dropped its tuition by 36%. So starting next year, tuition sticker price is $26,000.
Oh my gosh. Fantastic.
Right?
Yeah.
Amazing. So 26,000, and then they have pledged to raise that by 1,000 each year for 4 years, and so
Uh-huh.
that's our plan going forward. So part of that is that sticker that you're seeing on a lot of universities. You hear private university and it sounds
Mhm.
expensive, right?
Mhm.
A lot of private universities are discounting, right? So they
Mhm.
are giving scholarships, but they are not endowed scholarships. So they're in fact
Uh-huh.
just a discount off that sticker. And so Millikin has adjusted their price to be more what you get is what you pay for.
Yep.
Um, so this is opening the door to a lot more students who thought before that they could in no way afford a college education.
Mhm.
It also is matching the Macon promise. So Macon County, where we're located in Decatur, Illinois, that was a $26,000 pledge previously, and so we're opening that to not just Macon County residents, but to everybody. And then on top of that, we still give scholarships. So everyone who applies to Millikin and is accepted gets some kind of merit scholarship. There are obviously higher scholarships based on your grades and your test scores, including full presidential scholarship should you have the high enough. That's a 3.5 plus GPA or a pretty high test score at 27 plus ACT or a 1260 SAT. So there are those. There's also Long Vandenberg scholars. So those are students that apply for a special scholarship. They have high scholastic achievement for underrepresented communities, or they do a lot of community service. They
Mhm.
can apply for that. Um, and then also on top of that, we have fine arts scholarships for talent. So those usually range from 1,000 to 5,000 per year, and they're renewable for every year. So you can get up to 20,000 more dollars over the course of your 4 years.
Awesome. Really well explained. I love that, and it's great
Yeah,
to we never hear prices going down. We like,
I
hearing that.
know. It's
And
great news.
worth correcting, that $56,000 number I threw out there would have been with room and board too. So even before it seems like
Correct.
it
So
was
you still have
40.
that room and board on top, but that number has dropped
It's a big
significantly. So
reduction.
your
Yeah.
room and board is going to cost you around 13 or so, depending on your choices as far as rooms and meal
Yeah.
plans and things on
That's right. And
campus.
what kind of
Mhm.
IKEA furniture you add in there and what kinds of
Sure.
throws and comforters or
Yeah.
love it. Okay, this is great. The last school question I'll ask you before we take a little break and dive into the auditions,
Mhm.
is just, we're nearing, as this episode is going to be released, I think late January, early February. We're nearing that point where people are starting to hear back. I mean, it's still going to be a couple weeks away for most of our students, but then start making those decisions. Why do you think most students will end up signing on the dotted line for Millikin, and or why do you feel like they may say, I'm actually going to go in a different direction? I know this is your first, real year taking over, so you haven't
Yeah.
had a full audition season to hear that. But from what
True.
what does it seem like makes a student go, yes, Millikin, or no, I'm going to go to this other school?
Yeah, I think something special about our school is community and the students that build community here. The students that come on campus get a good sense of personal connection, vibe, that sort of one-on-one attention from your professors. Our student to professor ratio is going to be small. Your class sizes are going to be small, and not just in the School of Theater and Dance, but campus wide. You are never going to be put in a lecture hall with 300 people. It just
Mhm.
doesn't happen at Millikin, right? You're going to have 30 or less in a general education course, probably. Your theater classes are going to range from like 8 to 16, right?
Hmm.
Students. So you get a lot of one-on-one contact time. And if that is what you're seeking, that personal relationship, getting to know people really well and building that community, I think that is really the draw or the pull for our students.
I love it. Okay, let's take a short break. And on the back end of the break, we're going to talk a little bit about the audition and the admission process. Okay, we are back with Rachel Barnett, and we're talking a little bit about the audition process. So, you mentioned a little bit of kind of what you're looking for in terms of what a Millikin student is. As we're looking at auditions, what are you looking for in a Millikin student? So, what is a good audition? What could someone show within their monologues and their songs, their dance, but also sort of like what just generally makes a great audition for Millikin? What makes it seem like this is a student we're thinking about accepting?
That is a great question. And as someone who's not an actor or a musical theater person, that's a little bit hard for me to answer.
Hmm.
So, Millikan students, what we're looking for in the musical theater program is can you sing?
Hmm.
Can you show us character? Can you show us some sort of storytelling, right, in your experience? Are you comfortable in yourself and your body and your voice? And then also, can you move? Right. So our musical theater students do need to dance, but at the same time, we're going to do a short ballet combo that pretty much anybody can pick up, and we just want to see sort of the potential or what you're
Hmm.
capable of. So it's important to keep that in mind. So if you feel like I'm really strong in this area, but I'm not so sure about this other thing. There are those three things for our faculty to look at to see it, like what is the potential and is this
Uh-huh.
person trainable, capable, somebody that can absorb information in detail, somebody that can take direction, right?
Mhm.
I think those are the essential components in what our faculty are looking for.
I love it. Well, and I'd love to talk through a little bit of the audition year in terms of, so you guys do a pre-screen. Do you have a sense
Mhm.
of the numbers of like how many people who are, passing the pre-screens? What percentage of people who apply are going to actually get an in-person audition? I'll start there and then I'll keep going. So do you have a sense of that in terms of, what you're looking for to pass the pre-screen? Is it 50%? Is it 75%, 25%?
Yeah, I don't have the exact percentage number in front of me. We are seeing people not only through that pre screen audition, but also through festivals. So, some of the festivals we go to have auditions or the audition requirements that would meet our pre screen goals. And so, we are sometimes waving people in based on
Like a live
that.
pre-screen. Yep.
That audit exactly
Mhm.
that audition. So that number is a little difficult to come up with,
Sure.
but we are seeing literally thousands of
Yeah.
students either through that pre-screen or through that festival, and we're inviting or accepting maybe somewhere around 30 to 40% of those people coming through. The on-campus auditions, obviously a smaller core of people physically come on campus to those
Yep.
auditions, but we have a combination of live virtual for those that can only do a digital format. We have a Chicago weekend that we go in person to Chicago during the unified
Yep.
auditions. And then we have several audition dates on campus. So we're
Yep.
seeing a few hundred that way, and then also a few hundred through that festival system, as well as all those pre screen auditions.
Totally makes sense. And how are the
Mhm.
audition experiences different? So obviously, maybe discounting to some extent the festivals. Let's call those like a live pre-screen if that's what they function as. But
Mhm.
whether it's a live virtual audition, whether it's an on-campus audition, whether it's a unified or Chicago, audition experience, how do those different platforms change the audition for you guys?
Yeah. So we are wanting to see the acting, the singing, and the dance auditions and all of those. And so the live virtual is going to be a more condensed, shorter period of time, whereas your on-campus audition, you're going to get sort of treated or wined and dined in a way. You're going to get to see the campus, the building. You're going to get to interact and meet with students and have special talk back or question answer sessions. So you're going to have a different experience if you come on campus. Honestly, probably the best one, right? In terms of getting a sense of what is this place about and is it for me? you're going to have that sort of roll out the red carpet treatment there. Um, in addition to that, if you do a live virtual or you do Chicago or one of the festivals and you still want to come on campus, we absolutely want that and recommend that. So we're doing campus visit days all the time, or we're doing specialized visits where you come and you get your tour, you sit on in on a class that are totally separate from your audition. So all of those things are possible, but you're going to get a slightly different experience in each of them.
Totally. All right, I'm going to ask you my favorite question, which is just if you had to estimate how much of your decision or of the decision to say yes or no to a student after an audition, how much do you feel like is based on the skills displayed? So the acting, singing, dancing skill in those three areas versus intangibles, right? Versus how they answer an interview question, how they take an adjustment, the potential
Mhm.
that you see in them going, I think this is the kind of student who could learn. How much does it feel like it's about the kind of raw score that they might get from their skills versus how much is it about the human being that you see this person could be?
I think it's a mix of those things, really. I would say it's a piece of each, so equally balanced. There is skill there, right? There has to be some kind of skill there. You have to be of a certain level to enter that BFA program. And then also seeing some of that potential or that ability to take the note, take the direction, make an adjustment. I would say the skill plus that are really important for the BFA, but then also for the BA, if those are interested in that, if you're not meeting maybe that skill level that we're hoping to see walking in the door for the BFA, you still could be eligible for the BA, come in and still get lots of great performance opportunities. It's just going to be a little bit of a different experience. And then occasionally, some of our BAs come in. They really wanted to be in the acting program. They really wanted to be in the musical theater program, but they're like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and do the BA. Occasionally, they are taking those acting courses, or they're in an audition. Our faculty sees something special or something that moves them a level up, and on occasion, they're invited to come into that BFA.
That's really
So
cool.
that's an option as well.
Well, and then so once I like a student, I have the skills, I have the intangibles, I like them artistically, let's say,
Mhm.
for the BFA. How does it then factor in the academics? So how do the grades and the SATs, do essays factor in terms of admission? How does that work if we go, I know I want the student from the audition. How do I look at the rest of the application?
Yeah. If you get into Millikin, which the requirements are not that extreme, we don't we don't really assess that. So
You're
we're
not saying
not looking at a student
1,400
saying it
verified.
has to be a 3.0
Right.
or
Uh-huh.
no, not necessarily. So once the admissions office grants admission into Millikin, the door is open, basically. Um, as far as essay requirements, we don't have any. Um, Applying to Millikin is super easy. It's free. There's no fee, and it's very, very simple and streamlined. We also
Say that again.
accept the
Free
Common
and
App.
no
It
essays?
is free and
We
no
just had
essay.
students in their
Come
cars
on.
lifting their arms in the air going, are you
And you can literally do it on your phone. In fact, when we go to festivals and I'm like, "Have you applied?" I say, "Pull it up on your phone. You can do it in 15 minutes or less."
You just got about
So
1,000 more applications while you're
yes.
while you're speaking. No, but I
Absolutely.
mean,
So it
I don't think every
that it
college
doesn't hurt to
realizes
try.
the
Yeah,
I mean, some of our students, some of our students who apply to 15, 20 schools, some of them even more than
right.
20 schools, that can mean 30, 35 different essays. I mean, not completely unique
Exactly.
essays, but I don't think schools always realize that even they go, we just
What
have
they're
2 essays.
asking
It's,
of the
you
student. I think that
yeah,
the folks here realized that that was an unnecessary piece,
I
and
love
kinda
that.
took that component out. Now, there are, some scholarships and some honors and pieces like that where they will ask for written work, or some other things, but that is if you wish to apply for that. The average student does not have to.
And the same thing with no letters of recommendation, or do you still have to get letters of rec
You
as
do
part of your
not have
application?
to.
No letters
Nope.
of rec? My gosh, we love it. We love it. I'd love to talk about, so what else do you think about when you're kind of filling out a class? So of course you're looking at their
Mhm.
skills, you're looking at those intangibles, right? Are you conscious as you're looking at a class of stuff like gender balance, height, race, size, geographical balance, right? How do you kind of think about and factor those in? Especially I want to talk about, imagining you don't yield 100% of the students that you want to say yes to. How do you think about it with those initial offers and then waitlist movement? How does that work for your school?
Yeah, absolutely. So we would really love a balance. Like you'll see in most higher education and theater, specifically, it's very female heavy or female identifying heavy, musical theater in particular. And then we want to diversify our population, and I think that we've made great strides to that to raise our BIPOC community and create a safe space and an environment where they feel comfortable here. And so we're definitely looking at that. We want to branch out and we want to open the doors to as many people as possible. And I think that this new sort of tuition promise and sort of offering that accessibility to more folks is going to sort of heighten our both male and BIPOC population, hopefully.
Hmm. Yep, I love it. Well, and you mentioned all these different festivals and places that you go to. I see a whole long list here of, oh my gosh, really everything. If they have something in the Midwest, you're there. We love it.
We're
Um,
trying.
it's really great. Well, how does that then impact? I guess we were together at Pittsburgh Unifieds. I see you did Moonified's Cap, but then we're seeing lots of different other state-oriented places.
Mhm.
How do you feel like it impacts the sort of admission process for you in terms of if someone did meet you at that kind of festival and let's say didn't then come audition on campus, how does that work in terms of the wooing of them by you, of you trying to interact with them? How should I interact if I am a student and I'm auditioning for you, let's say at Pittsburgh Unifies in October, but I
Yeah.
haven't done something previously? Like, so how does that interaction work with those festivals or sort of non-conventional ways of meeting school?
Yeah. Well, we have an amazing recruitment coordinator, Sean Morrissey. He's one of our dance faculty members, and he has done this for years. So he sort of knows the auditions and the festival system, and so how it all operates. And he's a great point of contact. So he's a person that reaches out to people saying, "Hey, I noticed you did this piece of the process of the application, but I need this extra
Hmm.
something for you." Or I saw you at a festival, really loved your audition, and now go ahead and apply. So he's a great connection point there. We also have a dedicated fine arts admissions staff member. His name is Trevor Stout. And so many of our students that are putting in their applications as they listen to this podcast, right, are going to get personal connection with
I'm
that
sure.
admissions counselor.
Shout
So
out.
those are great people to work out or reach out to. There's also myself. Like, I'm a human and I get some emails from students saying, "Thank you so much for my acceptance into the program. What are next steps?" And if I don't know the answer, I certainly can find out who has that answer, or get you a connection with a faculty member down the hall who can give you better answers than I can. So we're trying to maintain that personal contact and reach out to the students that we've seen. We're trying to put out some text messages and some emails and sort of reinvigorate, especially in areas where we're not as well known, like Central Illinois and Chicagoland, places like that. People are going to know the Millikin name, but perhaps out of state. When I went to Texas, people went, "You're from where now?"
Where is that? Yep.
"Ooh, Decatur, Texas," and I said, "No, there's also a Decatur, Illinois." So I had to do some education, sort of in that area about our school, but
Well,
I
and
think showing our faces, right, at those festivals is also really helpful, to bring people in the door.
that leads me directly to my next question, which is that when you look at the college landscape and how it's changed since you've been in university systems, whether it's at Baylor, Oklahoma City. Millikin, of course, has been around for a while, and it really has had its. We had one of our guests, our first guest, Carrie Anderson, was a Millikin grad, and she's in
Nice.
her late 40s. I don't want to say an age, but it's been around for a while, and really was well known, I think, in that pocket of the Midwest. How have you felt the landscape change, especially with so many newer emerging programs, and now more of these, whether it's festivals or different ways that your people are interacting with schools? I think it's changing the sort of little pockets that schools had kind of naturally built and had already existed. How do you feel like that's affected the landscape for Milligan? And I guess how are you adjusting to the landscape?
Yeah, well, this program has really grown in recent years. It used to be a much smaller program, always well known for musical theater. I had a friend from high school. I went to high school in Normal, Illinois, about an hour from here, and so we all knew, right, in the theater and the choir setting, we all knew that Millikin was a good school for performance. But I think that we have broadened our possibilities by sort of reaching out nationally, and then also being ranked by some articles and some magazines as a top program for especially musical theater. So that has gotten word out there about us and really grown us to, we had numbers pre-COVID, 200 or over in terms of students. So we're hoping to get closer
Mhm.
back up to that number post-COVID.
Hmm. Well, and my my penultimate question here is just speaking of post COVID and sort of the journeys that we've had over the past 4 years of really sort of rocked the university world. What adjustments do you feel like Millikin has made, or you've helped to make now in your tenure at Millikin, to kind of prepare students for the ever changing business, right? For the aspects of virtual that have some stayed and some have gone, and how that's shifted into the hybrid of it all. We certainly can talk about sort of the racial reckoning, but what do you feel like? What are the adjustments? What are the changes that Millikin has made to sort of be current in 2024?
Yeah, I think Millikin is making some strides in terms of accessibility, opening the doors to a lot of different communities that they just hadn't in the past. This was known as a private institution that was largely white. We even had some speakers at graduation that talked about their experience in the 70s and 80s was drastically different than where we are today. So I think that we've definitely made some steps forward there. As far as post COVID, I think in the theater world, we've all showed what we're capable of in terms of creative problem solving, right? The show must go on, the industry must go on, and we've had this opportunity to sort of rebound. What did we do during the pandemic and the shutdown and the limitations put upon us? And then also, what do we do now? Do we always go back to what we did before? Not necessarily. We've sort of entered a different world. So, offering options in terms of remote accessibility when it's needed, allowances for people that need that mental health break. There's definitely resources on campus for students keeping tabs on mental health awareness. We have a care foundation here that focuses on mental health and sort of disadvantaged folks and sort of keeping that abreast. We also have a lot of student organizations and students sort of watching each other's backs and sort of, like I said before, creating that community. So students that come here are finding a different brand of family and community that maybe they wouldn't get other places. And so that's going to be a different look. I think pre-pandemic, we all were sort of doing our own thing, or there was this work-life balance that was not happening, and people are now recognizing that, like, we need to eat, sleep, take care of ourselves, take care of each other, watch out for each other and each other's mental health. And I think that that is very present on this campus right now.
That is awesome. Okay, my last question to you is just toward the parents in this process. If there's any advice you have to a parent who might be navigating, whether they're a parent of a junior, a sophomore, just beginning this process, or a senior and they're right smack dab in the middle of it, from your experience, any advice for those parents of what they can do to help their child as much as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say trust your gut. So trust your initial response. Trust also your student's response of, this place feels right. This place feels like somewhere I could belong. I think that that's really important to trust those instincts that you have when you're meeting people, when you're talking to people, when you're visiting that campus experience. To sort of trust that, but also I'm sure if the parents are listening to this podcast, they're doing their own homework and their own research on programs. Um, think about transparency when you're talking to folks from different universities. There's a lot of big sales pitch, and I hope my sales pitch is okay.
It's
But
subtle.
that's
It's
I'm
calm. It's subtle. We love, Rachel. We love.
I'm not an actor, I'm not a showman, I'm not a director, and so I think coming from that place of that different perspective where it's not the used car salesman talk is really important. So talk to people about what is real. What am I going to get out of this experience? What should I expect? If you feel people are guarded or not being transparent, maybe that's a red flag. Maybe do your homework or your research on that. And I hope that we're giving people the information that they're looking for. If you ask a question, we're trying to find the most truthful
Hmm.
answer for you in that process, because we don't want to put this shiny display on, trap you into a thing that you did not sign on for, right? So we're trying to be really transparent. So I would say, parents, do your homework and sort of compare. If you're asking the same questions of these different programs, what are the responses, and are you being led astray, or led to some other subject, or are you getting the real answer that you asked them? So sort of that directness is important.
I love that. And if people do want more information on Millikin,
Yeah.
do you suggest the website? Do you suggest social media? Do they reach out directly to some of the people you mentioned? What's the best way for them to get more information if they want something that they didn't hear in this pod?
Yeah. So the website is a great place to start out, because it's going to have a lot of that audition information. It's going to have the application, like I said, really easy to use. If you're not getting the details or the information from that, you certainly can reach out to any of
Mhm.
us, and we will give you more and more information. When we go to festivals and things, we have like all this, if I have it in front of me,
Holding up
where
a
it has a
brochure for
course of
those who are just
study,
listening.
right? Of course I'm prepared. I'm a designer.
Of course.
Um, so we have course of study, and we will just map out for you, what does your 8 semester course of study look like? And you can also pull that up online as well, and you can get a sample version of that. You can contact myself. You can contact Jashay Ali, who works in our front office. She's our admin assistant and audition coordinator. So
Mhm.
often, if you're scheduling your audition, she's going to be the person you're going to talk to. Or you can contact Sean Morrissey, who's the recruitment coordinator. He's a great resource as well. Um, and then also from our website, you're just going to see many programs we didn't get to talk about. We have study abroad program. We have immersive classes where you get to go to Disney. Come on,
Come on.
you
I
want
see
to
a
go
new
to
musicals
there.
workshop. We got all
New
kinds of stuff.
exactly. We have
Come
all
on.
kinds of special programming that you won't find everywhere. We have Shakespeare corrected class. You can go do community involvement and put on Shakespeare, and actually help develop Shakespeare with inmates at Decatur Correctional Facility. So we've got a lot of interesting things that, if you'd like to check us out, I certainly welcome you
I
to go
love it. What
ahead.
a good guess. You're cleaning up the things I didn't ask you about at the end. It's fantastic. And giving a little tease for more information. It's
There you
fantastic.
go.
Rachel, thanks so much for the time today. This was such a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Charlie.
Oh, heck yeah. I hope you enjoyed that episode. I'm sure you're sick of me saying the word multifaceted, but boy, I like that a lot. We've heard the term multi-passionate as a variant on multi-hyphenate, but I do really enjoy fascinated when you're talking about someone who's on the road to be multifaceted, as many of our students are, right? It has more of the illusion of being multi-curious. So I think it's something really cool. I think it was an accident from Rachel, but I'm absolutely going to try to steal that and move forward with it. I do fear today's takeaways will be long, as I'm planning a joyous rant at the end. We'll see how that goes. But the quick hitters are just that idea of the showcase in other cities that aren't New York City and LA. We've talked about that before, about how schools are trying to be smart with how they release digital information and how important that is. But here's another way to potentially cut through the noise in a place that's not quite as much competition. Now, Chicago, of course, is still a really huge city, and we're talking about Millikin doing a showcase in Chicago. But still, many, many fewer showcases are going to occur in Chicago. A much bigger difference than the competitiveness of that as a, theater place, right? Chicago's not that much smaller of a theater city than New York, but there'll be many more fewer showcases that happen in Chicago as opposed to New York, especially for musical theater. So there's a potential leg up for schools that choose to do that. And that same can be said for schools that help you get in the foot in the door, whether it's in Seattle or Pittsburgh, right? I certainly experienced some of that in school at Carnegie Mellon, that, I got hooked up with a local Pittsburgh agent. That was just a direct recommendation from a teacher of mine. And I ended up doing some TV shows. I did an MTV show. I did a bunch of voiceovers, right? And I know a lot of programs will do that, right? That's a great experience if you can kind of cut your teeth a little bit. A lot of my friends who attended the Guthrie program in Minnesota, they did the same thing, right? Many even ended up spending a few years in Minnesota after they graduated. They cut their teeth, they got built up their resume a little bit, and then moved to whether it was in New York or Chicago, that kind of thing, right? In Chicago, of course, as an example, that is a terminal destination for many folks, since it is such a big city in and of itself. But we have heard a few examples on the pod, like Jesse Mueller and Sean Allen Krill, who started in Chicago and then made the leap to Broadway. And I am a fan of any school who talks about how they differentiate their showcase so that it's not just show up in New York City and hope the agents come. For schools with big names and reputation, that can be the whole strategy. But most schools are not in that lucky place. And in the competitive marketplace, thinking creatively is really smart. The other short takeaway is what we talked about a bit with Baldwin Wallace in our first episode, but it's also something to look at in terms of how theater schools are structured and who are the people you're surrounding yourself with. In that case, we're talking about musicians. There's a lot of music that Baldwin Wallace was surrounding yourself with in all the different majors. Does this school offer competitive theater majors like what Millikin does, stage management, costume design, etc.? But it could be other things. It could be lighting design or directing, right? These might be BFA or MFA, depending, and it might give you a good indication of, do they have a robust costume department? Of course, if you can visit, that's even better. You'll get to know some of those questions, right? But will you be working with excellent student stage managers? That could be cool to know. Now, is this something that you need at a school to have amazing costumes? Of course not. But it can be a really cool way to engage with fellow theater makers who then can become future collaborators. If you ever produce theater later in your life, especially in your early career, it is really awesome to know people who can do other jobs than step onto a stage. It is always easy to find people who are willing to get paid to act, even if you're paying them very little. But it's really hard to get high quality people to costume and light and build the sets for your show when you're talking about an off Broadway salary they might make. It's almost always a connection of someone you know, as these positions are just in such high demand. You're not going to find a great stranger, likely, unless you're really lucky, to costume your show if you're doing an off Broadway. And having produced off Broadway theater, I promise you that is true. You can get amazing people to do it, but normally it's because you know them and they're saying, sure, I believe in you. I'll do you a favor. I'll do it for cheap, and here's what I can do in this amount of time, etc. And something I really appreciated at Carnegie Mellon and the way they were structured in having elite MFA directors and MFA playwrights, many of whom went, and this is also true, MFA costumes, I mean, many things at Carnegie Mellon, many of whom they went on to really successful careers and were great connections for us. But especially true for me, what I really liked is they didn't have MFA actors. That's not to say you can't be great and go to a great school that has a great MFA program, right? Anyone who attends Yale as a BA major, just a theater major, you're going to appreciate and enjoy that there is amazing theater on campus. It's one of the most competitive MFA programs that exists. But for the most part, if you're a Yale undergrad, you're probably going to feel pretty second fiddle to the MFAs. And I'm saying probably meaning you're going to feel second fiddle to the MFAs. And I think this can be true of a lot of schools that offer both BFAs and MFAs when they're in the same discipline with the same title, right? That the BFAs can feel a little bit like the ugly stepchildren to the MFAs if they're the exact same thing. But to have an elite MFA or maybe an elite BFA in other disciplines of theater, so you have peers in those other disciplines, I think is a really nice boon in general. It's not a requirement at a program, but it can be a cool little bonus when you go, oh, and they have that program? That's neat, right? And again, there's not only one way to do it, of course, right? For instance, some people would say, well, if you have an MFA directing program, are you maybe less likely to be bringing in amazing professional directors? Maybe, though I'll say at CMU, they blessedly did both. And a lot of great MFA programs will bring in great guest directors who maybe are teaching the MFAs and all those things. And the same could be true, of course, with working with, you might work with awesome adult stage managers because you're affiliated with a theater, and so you're working with professional stage managers as opposed to other student stage managers. So many different models, of course, can work, and what matters most is the training. These are more nice bonuses than a requirement. But it can be cool if you make friends with an awesome playwright and then you get to be in their shows, right? We had Dan Weschler on the pod of Pigpen fame, currently starting their Water for Elephants run on Broadway. Shout out to them. And he met the awesome Josh Harmon at school. Josh wrote Significant Other and Admissions, Bad Jews, these are all Broadway plays. And Josh ended up officiating their wedding. Now, of course, is that a guarantee if you go to school that you're going to meet someone in a cool discipline and you'll end up making friends with them? Of course not, right? But it's kind of nice and you never know, and it can be a cool boon to your career. Am I saying the word boon too much? I feel like I've said boon 3 times in this takeaway. Okay, those are my short takeaways. Here we go. Let's do the big one. Okay, the thing I wanted to talk about, and just praise to the heavens on Millikin's part, is the part about their applications being free, streamlined, and involving no essays. I'm going to say that again. Free, streamlined, and involving no essays. Now, I've not actually gone through and done the Millikin process, so I'm trusting that what she's saying is actually true, that it is actually streamlined. But let's say that it is true, and I know a lot of schools do make that effort to make it streamlined, make it something you can do in your phone. This is awesome. Any of our students who've gone through this process will tell you how much of a drag specifically those essays are. If you think about it, a lot of our students and a lot of students who are doing this process conscientiously are applying to 18 to 20 schools. I mean, some will tell you they're doing 30. We don't think you need to do 30. That's ridiculous. But 18, 20, some do as much as 25, depending what their goals are and what their risk profile. If they're looking at some of those most competitive schools, that makes sense to potentially do that many schools. And if you're doing even just 20, let's say 20 is the number that you're doing, and each school has an average of 2 essays, it might mean you end up writing 40 essays. A lot of our students have talked about they wrote 50 essays throughout this process. And some schools have more, if you can believe it. Some of those essays may be shorter, some are longer, and none of them specifically are intended to be onerous. They're all supposed to be, this is casual, just I need 200 words here. I need this, especially when they ask for multiple essays. But there are schools in the past that have asked for 5 essays. This to me is insane for a musical theater major, especially in a world where they're creating a personalized wild card, which is also a bit of a personal statement, and writing a Common App essay as well. I feel like a good rule of thumb in life to abide by is like, if everybody acted like this, how would the world be? It can be a good guide anytime you're in like a morally ambiguous situation. Is this a victimless crime, or am I abusing someone's kindness in a way that if everyone did it, the world would be untenable? Like, should I double park in this zone? Should I steal this pen that's been left out for everyone to use? Should I sign up for multiple signups on this sign-up sheet knowing I can only use one and I'll cancel the others later? To me, asking for 5 essays is the equivalent of stealing the pen. It's not so bad if one school does it, but if multiple do it, it means that student might end up writing 50, 60, 70 essays if each school started asking for 3, 4, 5 essays, right? And as you heard from the podcast, for the majority of schools, the essays are not a crucial part of their admissions process. For some, they're absolutely a factor, and some a large factor. But as you've heard, for most audition-based programs, the audition is by far the most important factor, and everything else is more secondary, more supplemental. One of our first guests on the podcast, Caitlin Hopkins, has made this a bit of a personal mission for her, and I really applaud it for her for it. She's talking about access and inequity in the process, and there are some direct financial hurdles for sure, some of which can and should be addressed by things like fee waivers. But I think not often enough discussed are the hurdles of time and sweat equity that make this process impossible to do if you're trying to do it conscientiously. If you create a system where a student has to write 50 essays to do the process thoughtfully, then you're creating a world that will likely box out a significant percentage of students who don't have the resources to hire an amazing MTCA college advisor or an essay coach, or even just can afford a team like MTCA in general that can guide them through all of this. And some of these problems of access are not easy to solve. We've talked about this before, about how hard it is to get a group of artists to all agree on what is necessary artistically. And due to the nature of the beast that is the audition, they feel if they simplify the procedures to the point that everyone is asking for exactly one thing, you fear that students will overly work toward that singular polished product, especially if they don't have expert guidance pulling them away from doing that and letting them find what is messy and organic on those things, right? And then the schools fear they won't be able to see the present organic artist that they're looking for. So they do sometimes naturally try to outbox each other a bit artistically, not necessarily out of a sense of competition or arrogance, but out of a perceived need to see something fresh and new and different than what other schools are asking for. Ideally, more of them, in my opinion, would do this in the adjustment portion of the audition versus putting too much of the burden on the front end for the student, that if it's in the room what you're doing, go to town. But if you're asking them to do a lot of work in advance, okay. But each school is going to run their audition how they're going to run it. But for the parts of the application process, like essays, which in many cases are more about busy work than a large direct impact on admission, it is really frustrating when schools can't cut through their own bureaucracy. And again, I do understand many of these programs, they have their hands tied. The university has their set requirements in some cases, and there's just nothing they can do about the complicated aspects of the application. But I do really applaud the programs and the heads that make that concerted effort toward making that application process easier on students, even at the risk, and I know it is a risk, of making themselves seem like an easier school to get into and how that could potentially have negative connotations. Because I do think, and I've pointed out this before, that is a part of this process as well. That some schools create barriers to entry, not just because they deem them necessary, but because they think it makes themselves look good. Like putting yourself behind the plastic at CVS, you automatically seem like a more valuable object that someone might want to try to steal. I know that is true. I specifically know that's true for a number of schools that added pre-screens with the advent of the common pre-screen. Again, they didn't have a pre-screen before the common pre-screen existed, and then they added a pre-screen when this new tool that was supposed to increase equity and access came out. Is that because they suddenly, all of a sudden, had enough applicants that they needed a pre-screen? No. So all of a sudden, a very well-intended gesture by Caitlin, who's trying to push for this common pre-screen, ends up just making more schools and more barrier to entries where there weren't there previously. Why? Well, by the nature of being on that list, those schools felt they were aligning themselves with some of their more competitive peers, which required pre-screens. And in general, I understand this, if I were a school and I'm looking at the group of schools that require pre-screens versus the group of schools that don't, most would want to think of themselves as being in that first group, as most of the most competitive schools do require pre-screens, with notable exceptions. We talked about on the podcast, like Baltimore's, NYU. There are other competitive schools that don't ask for pre-screens. But if you could choose to be in Group A or Group B, a lot of schools go, what if I made myself in Group A by quote unquote requiring the pre-screen? Or you'll notice some of them will asterisk and say, it's not required, but we accept it. Okay, what does that mean? I'm sending in a pre-screen when I could have just had an audition without doing the pre-screen, right? But they're making themselves look a little bit like there's a hoop to jump through. So we are desired. If you're sitting and looking at 100 schools and you don't know which schools are good, that's one of the ways that sometimes they might get more applications in their mind. Okay, so how do we fix this? Of course, I don't have all the answers, and I don't think there's one answer that solves this problem for every school, as they have to deal with their own administrations and potentially actually differing criteria on admittance. As you've heard on this podcast, different schools can actually be looking for different things and use these potential application tools in different ways. But as we enter unified season, and everybody's favorite walk-ins become a huge part of the process for many of our students, I wonder what we can learn from walk-ins. This reversal of the process in meeting the faculty first and then applying, and often for a walk-in school, it is a very simplified application process, is absolutely the preferred way to do this for the vast majority of audition-based theater programs. Now, of course, I understand, due to the nature of the college application and admission process in general, not every school is going to be able to conduct their process without an application first. And I'm not suggesting that they do, right? Often these schools need the basics of academic admission, and I think there's a legitimate part to the idea of saying, I don't want to waste my time falling in love with a student artistically who it turns out is academically unqualified for my institution, and I'm not even going to be able to admit them. I wouldn't want to do that if I was a college faculty as well. I think that's fair. And there's likely nothing that we on this podcast would be able to influence or that program heads would be able to get done that completely circumvents the needs for an office admission. I'm not suggesting that. However, for those program-specific requests, which those supplemental essays basically are program-specific requests, whether it's a short video statement, a supplemental piece of additional film material that goes beyond the common pre-screen requirements, 5 additional essay prompts, which, how dare you, but it's up to you, whatever you need, any additional letters of recommendation, if you need additional artistic letters of recommendation, anything in that category, right? What have you, anything that's supplemental that you as a program are requiring, wouldn't it be nice if that request happened after the live audition? So you as the program, you still get the pre-screen with artistic requirements, you get the wild card to get to know them, which I think should be enough information to be able to pass the first artistic hurdle for most schools. But then for the stuff that you might consider more of a tiebreaker, or it could be a big boost, as some people talk about it could be a factor later in the process, however you want to put it, what if you only required that step of your 100 favorite actors that you saw? This way, you save the other 2,000 applicants for those most competitive schools the stress and pressure of working their butts off on stuff that might never be a large factor for them. And for the people who reach that callback or that additional phase, they would know with confidence that they should pour their hearts and souls into knowing that they are in fact in the mix, right? I would do such a better job with audition going, they're really interested in you. You need to do these 2 additional things. What a different thing than if at the outset I'm going, as I apply to 20 other schools, I have to do these 2 additional things, right? I know our students would throw themselves into those requirements with abandon, whether that's asked in late February, early February, whatever, after they've auditioned, even into March, as they're sitting and getting results. If they were asked, I need this additional thing, because we see it when they're asked for a callback or a second interview or any of those kind of things. Students get really excited. Okay, cool. I'm waiting around. What do you need from me, right? What a difference to be asked when someone knows you're super interested versus at the beginning when you're asking for all this stuff and you don't even know if the school likes you yet, right? Wouldn't that be nice for all? Let's start the movement, podcast listeners, and make this happen. Well, that's it for another episode of Mapping the College Edition. We seem to have avoided a full rant and instead, I believe, started a movement. That's not too shabby. If you want to join the movement, please leave us a review on your podcast platform of choice and tell us your idea of how to reform the process and make it easier, more efficient, while still maintaining quality control. This movement can operate leaderlessly. I need not be the leader of this movement. If you write a good idea in the review, I'm going to read it into the show. How about that? You can also leave us a rating and review right on your phone, just like the process of applying to Millikin. It couldn't be simpler. Go ahead and do that if you don't mind. You can also follow us at Mapping the College Edition on Instagram or TikTok at MT College Editions, and check us out on our website at mtca.com. Oh, and I forgot to say this at the beginning, but next week is going to be a special episode. We're going to do a unifieds release. So we're going to release all of our interviews that we did last year at mostly Chicago and LA Unifieds. So I think there's one or two from New York. I brought out a little tiny microphone and did some fun interviews with some of our students who are currently going through the process. So next week I'm going to release those in a slightly edited, though it's not going to be deeply edited form. Slightly edited form will be our episode next week. So we'll be back 2 weeks from now with KO from Northwestern, a really fun college episode, and then back to our regularly scheduled artist episodes, some of which we already have in the can, but we wanted to do that special in honor of Unifieds episode. So that'll be next Wednesday for all listeners. When you see that and you go, what's this episode? This feels different. It is different. It's a special episode. To my young artists out there mapping their journeys, what new word will you create today? We'll see you next week for a special episode.